And through the drifts the snowy cliffs did send a dismal sheen, nor shapes of men nor beasts we ken, the ice was all between.
Good day, everybody on the internet. It's Walloficecream here for another Top 10. This week's Top 10 is Top 10 Unreprinted Vintage Rares for Modern. Have you ever thought about what Modern would look like if some vintage or legacy rares would be snuck into it? A couple of them already have. Magic the Gathering has a reprint policy. It's called the Reserved List, that says that about 75% of all rares from the first 8 years of Magic the Gathering, 7 years of Magic the Gathering, can't be reprinted in any more sets. It's for the collectors, people who are rewarded for being pioneer players in Magic the Gathering history, or simply people who just want to have an investment. Recently, there's been a couple of new rares that are a lot like the old Magic the Gathering cards. There's a new Multani, there's a new Kavu Titan, and a lot of these vintage cards have inspired slightly different modern legal cards. For example, Natural Balance is now Scape Shift. Precognition, which is a 5-mana enchantment that Fate Seals your opponent, is now Jace the Mind Sculptor. It's a mana less, and it does 4 times as much. But there are cards that are not on the reserved list. Either they just weren't very powerful, not well known, and my Wizards of the Coast just wasn't afraid for it to be not on the reserved list. They're rares. There isn't that many. I looked through all of them and cut out the ones that are on the reserved list, and here's 10 cards that could be reprinted. So without further ado, here's a top 10. Number 10, Tower of the Magistrate. It's never been reprinted. It gives a creature protection from artifacts until end of turn. It's a great card for 100 card or 99 card commander decks. Simply because you have to put about 40 land in your commander deck, and non-basic lands are restricted, as well as all other cards in Commander. But so basically, it gives people a chance to look at 40 different non-basic lands for their artifact deck, because there's no reason to play basic lands in your artifact commander deck, because if your commander is an artifact or an Eldrazi, then all of your lands could just very well tap for colorless, and if they tap for colorless, they can do a little bit more. It's hard to see what this card does, but basically just one tap, your opponent's creature unequips all of his equipment. Yeah, if a creature gains protection from artifacts, it can't be equipped anymore, and all the equipment falls off. So if your opponent's playing like it was Jitte in Legacy, you could just use Towers of Magistrate and just repeatedly take it off the opponent. It's actually in Legacy. But I would like to see this card in Modern reprinted sometime, just to see, how if the Cawblade metagame gets too big because of Jace the Mind Sculptor being legal in Modern. Something, that would counter that. Something for players to at least think about. Number 9, Pursuit of Knowledge. Never reprinted from Stronghold. I've had Pursuit of Knowledge. Mark Rosewater recently talked about not liking Dawn of Hope, because Dawn of Hope is a white card that allows you to draw cards. The thing is, white is an allied color with blue, and blue is very good at drawing cards. So white should at the very least be moderate or weak at drawing cards, being a friendly color for blue. So I think Dawn of Hope is okay, and I think it's on color. I think Mark Rosewater is wrong. Pursuit of Knowledge was a great card because it was nicknamed Pursuit of Cards. So what you would do is you pay white 3, and you play Pursuit of Knowledge, and then you cast blue for a Brainstorm. And Brainstorm is draw 3 and then put 2 cards back. Well, if you don't have any cards in your hand, and you top deck a Brainstorm, and you have a Pursuit of Knowledge into play, you can Brainstorm, stop drawing all 3 cards, put 3 study counters on Pursuit of Knowledge. It doesn't have to be during your draw step. It just says to skip drawing a card. You don't have to put 2 cards back, because you didn't have any cards in your hand to begin with. You just top decked Brainstorm. And then you remove 3 study counters from Pursuit of Knowledge, and you draw 7 cards. So a top decked Brainstorm just ends up being a top decked 5 mana draw 7. It's an amazing card. I love this card. Pursuit of Cards. I wish it were in Modern because it would. I think it would go well with Jace the Mind Sculptor, kind of white blue control decks. Number 8. I would put this at number 1 if we're going by solely my opinion, but I also kind of going by the opinion of the community. What an ugly picture. There we go. The Otarian lands. The Otarian land cycle is about from Odyssey block. Odyssey takes you to Otaria, which is basically a continent on Dominaria that's not part of the main continent. It wasn't part of the Brothers of the War. They moved to a different continent, talked about Kamal, Pit Fighter, all that jazz. They have cards very close to this. This is not on the reserved list. I've been waiting for Darkwater Catacombs to show up, some Masters set somewhere. Maybe Return to Dominaria. Maybe we could just have this entire cycle appear. Been crossing my fingers, I swear, for like 15 years to see this show up. Why is it important? Well, how good these were back when Soul Ring was legal. Back when people play with Soul Ring and Darkwater Catacombs. You could, like, turn 1, play a Soul Ring, and then turn 2, Darkwater Catacombs. And then you could filter the colorless mana from your Soul Ring to get 2 colored mana. It was so busted. There's nothing like that. There's still nothing like it. The filter lands that exist today require either a blue or black. It's a blue/black mana symbol here. And then it would add like blue-black or blue-blue or black-black. But you'd have to start with colored mana, and there's just nothing that starts with colorless mana that makes colored mana, except for the signets, and the signets are very popular. Number 7, Crumbling Sanctuary. I would like to see a Battle of Wits deck in Modern be playable. There's not many Battle of Wits decks. Battle of Wits is if you have 200 cards in your library. Next turn, you take your next turn, you win the game. So a lot of players, there was, I think, Kenji played a 240 card deck and got around 12th place and extended with Battle of Wits, and that's the best the deck's ever done, and anywhere even close to that, it's just very difficult to build the deck. You need a lot of money in Magic cards, and tuning it would be next to impossible. It's tough just to tune a 100 card deck in Singleton or Commander. Imagine trying to tune a 240 card deck. I think Crumbling Sanctuary would pull Battle of Wits decks over the edge because you just would not die with Crumbling Sanctuary in your deck. I just want to see it. I just want to see it. Collective Restraint. It's a Pillow Fort card. It's basically a propaganda card. Creatures can't attack unless you pay 2, or in this case 3 or 4 or 5. I'd love to see Pillow Fort decks as a rogue deck show up. I love playing rogue decks. I only play rogue decks. This could even be seen in epic decks, in enduring ideal decks. Imagine Collective Restraint just showing up, say a 3-color Collective Restraint deck, and now creatures can't attack unless your controller pays 3. That would really lock them down even more than propaganda. I'd love to see just the deck be brute a little bit more. Next up, we have Spontaneous Generation. Put a 1/1 green sapling creature token into play for each card in your hand. In Trinity Green, my version of Papa's V's Trinity Green deck, I saw Spontaneous Generation card shop and just went wild. And I played it for years and extended. Basically, you have turn 2 Rathalos, which taps add green mana for each forest you have. You can turn 2 Rathalos. Turn 3, you don't even put your land drop. You hold the land drop in your hand. You cast Spontaneous Generation, and then you make your land drop. And if you do that, it makes 6 sapling creature tokens. They printed Return to Dominaria recently, and they reprinted sapling creature token cards, but I wish they printed Spontaneous Generation. Alright, next up we have Parallax Tide. Parallax Tide never got reprinted, for good reason. You can find rogue decks still being played in Legacy that use the Parallax cards. And what happens is, if you have any card that allows you to sacrifice permanents, I think Rats of Wrath, you can just sacrifice your own permanents to it. Parallax Tide will come into play. You can put it a fade counter on the stack, fade counter, remove fade counter on the stack, and then you have 5 abilities on the stack. And in response to those 5 abilities, you sacrifice Parallax Tide. And then Parallax Tide reads the ability, return all cards removed from the game by Parallax Tide. It's first in, last out. Right? So the 5 fade counters are the first things you do, but it's the last thing that happens. So your opponent gets his lands back. If you think backwards, your opponent gets his lands back, which there aren't any to get back because none of them have been removed yet. And then the rest of the stack resolves, and you remove 5 lands from the game forever. Next up, we got Null Brooch. Null Brooch is in Draw Go. We don't see many Draw Go decks. Standstill is still a deck, and Vintage even. Just doing nothing every single turn, hoping your opponent will pop your Standstill. Standstill is if your opponent casts a card, sacrifice Landstill to get to draw 3. It's like Ancestral Recall for 2 mana, except you can't do anything. You can't cast creatures because if you cast a spell, then your opponent draws 3 cards. It's if any player casts a spell. I'd like to see Null Brooch and Draw Go. Just seeing a really weird kind of Draw Go. Maybe this would be played at 8 rack or something. Okay, now we're up to number 2. And now the list gets kind of controversial. And I guess they need some kind of introduction. Magic the Gathering has a lot of non-basic lands. Mark Rosewater wrote that Magic the Gathering sets sell because of non-basic lands. He's saying how well Return to Ravnica sold because it reprinted the shock lands. How well Theros sold because it had the complete cycle of temples. And players were saying, when are you going to reprint fetch lands? Enemy colored fetch lands. They reprinted Khans of Tarkir. There's allied colored fetch lands. And so Magic the Gathering has been a place where lands end up in the rare slot. If you believe in like Power to the People, or no, these lands should be in the uncommon slot, temples should be an uncommon card. I hear you. But the thing is, there are too many fetch lands in Magic the Gathering. And my basic belief is, you never hurt yourself. Never hurt yourself. There's plenty of people out there who are willing to hurt you. So, I don't play fetch lands. It's just me. And I wish a lot of decks would go a little bit easier on the fetch lands. So without further ado, here's number 2. Contamination. Color hosers were, in the early days of Magic the Gathering, there were cards that would just completely destroy an entire color. Light of Day, black creatures cannot attack or block. There was Infernal Darkness, which is a black hosing creature about as powerful. There are even cards like Extinction, which destroy an entire creature type. It's very specific cards. They're called color hosers. Recently in Magic the Gathering, they've turned them down a lot. You'll still see people play like cards like Boil, which destroy all islands, and Blood Moon, which hoses non-basic lands. But I think I wish competitive Magic would go a little bit easier on the non-basic lands, because it's so expensive to have a library of non-basic lands. So here's number 1. It's a tie. Back to basics. Non-basic lands not untapped during their controller's untapped phases. It's still in Vintage. If you're playing, say, Blue Draw Go versus Bug, for example, in Vintage, if you play back to basics, the Bug deck's dead. They just play so many dual lands. They don't have any lands at all to untap, and they have to leave 2 mana open for Abrupt Decay for the rest of the game. Back to basics would basically force players to play a couple of more basic lands in their deck and stop thinking so hard about non-basic lands. And I think players like building, say, 3-color decks with 12 shock lands, like the full set of shock lands for all 3 colors, and it could just be splashing one of the 3 colors. And I see a lot of players do this. They put it in the full set of 12 shock lands because they just don't want to think about what lands they should put in their deck. And it would fix that. Number 1, I'm surprised this has fallen out of favor in Vintage. Ruination. What an ugly picture. Destroy all non-basic lands. It's worse than Blood Moon. For some reason, recently in Vintage, I saw a couple of decks in the Vintage Super League that would play turn 1 Blood Moon. And Vintage, you don't have to play turn 1 Blood Moon. You can play turn 2, turn 3 Ruination. It'd do some more damage than Blood Moon, I would think, against a bug. That's just me. Ruination would completely change the scheme of Modern. Like I said, there really is an improper amount of thought in non-basic lands. I won't say any more about it. Here's an honorable mention, and I was thinking about it. Basalt Monolith. It's not a rare. It's an uncommon. It has been reprinted. It's not in Modern, though. I think it would shape Modern a lot if Basalt Monolith were legal. It was on the reserve list until about 2002, was taken off, along with other terrible cards. But I think Basalt Monolith would be important in Modern because there's Unburial Rights Gifts Ungiven deck. And the entire point of Gifts Ungiven Burial Rights is you can use Gifts Ungiven to put Unburial Rights in your graveyard. You can put, say, Elesh Norn, 7-mana white creature in your graveyard. And then that's turn 4, and then you untap, and then you spend 4 mana, and you Unburial Rights to reanimate Elesh Norn. And if you just had Basalt Monolith in your deck, you could turn 3 Basalt Monolith, turn 4 Elesh Norn. It would do the same thing. It would be just a huge shortcut in Magic the Gathering. Basalt Monolith was originally thought that it should be banned because of Power Artifact. People considering whether the entire card should be restricted. I don't think Basalt Monolith's that bad. It's weaker than Nanavolt, it's weaker than Mana Crypt, it's weaker than Soul Ring. And it's not on the reserve list anymore. So what do you think? Post what you think in the comments.
What? Wall of Ice Cream found a way to make money? That's right. You can help your favorite YouTuber, your third favorite YouTuber, by getting a month of Humble Bundle and referencing me with this reference code, or going to Hulu and buying several months of Hulu, or going to G2A and checking out that website. I have a reference link right there on the screen. So just go, and I can get a couple of bucks, and it pays for these cool things I have, like a Yeti microphone that I can't really afford. So go for it. Help your third favorite streamer.